The Warsaw Uprising began on the 1st of August, 1944. 0 hour, or W hour as they called it, was supposed to be at 5 o'clock. But the first outbreak of shooting began earlier in the day at Joliborz, the northern suburb of Warsaw. That encounter, which began at 1:30 p.m., was the first skirmish of the Warsaw Uprising. As the saying goes, much has been written. Was it a good idea? Was it launched at the right time? Were there other opportunities? You may well ask. The fact remains that it did take place, and the people who took part in it were brave and beautiful. In the annals of uprisings against tyrannical rule, the Warsaw Uprising is unsurpassed. For 63 days, the Poles waited for the Russians to come across the river from the east and aid them in their rebellion against the Nazis. This did not happen. History has told us why. The Russians were quite happy to watch the Poles be destroyed by the Germans, rather than for the Poles to be free after World War II. There is no doubt about this. This was Stalin's plan. The Warsaw Uprising is indelible on the memory of the 20th century. At the Warsaw Uprising Museum, this history is set in stark terms. You're able to take a close look at those 63 days of fighting for freedom. This is an experience that will not leave you untouched. It will change the way you think about history of this time. And it will remind you of what a great capital Warsaw actually is. The city that stood against one of the greatest tyrannies the world has ever seen and rose again to become a modern leading city in Europe. The next series of episodes will take you through the history of the Warsaw Uprising. Thanks for watching. Hello everybody, and welcome back to Poland Daily Travel. We're in a very special place upstairs in the museum, this special room, which I guess has a special light to preserve the quality of these. Yeah. What are these? It says protocol.
Yeah, these are protocols of exhumation. So when someone is buried, sometimes we take out the body to check whether that's the person we think is lying over there. So after the end of World War II, Polish Red Cross had plenty of work to do because Warsaw was one big cemetery. Yes, about 200,000 people who were buried or unburied lying here within
it was
the
a
walls
graveyard,
of the
effectively, the city.
Exactly, that's it.
Yeah.
And well, in fact, in this place, we discovered the story of the Wola massacre. So those 3 days during the Warsaw Rising, when German troops executed 50,000 civilians who lived here in this area. They eventually took 2 streets and they marched from the western parts of Warsaw towards the city center to clear their way to the Vistula River. That was the order of Hitler. And they killed anyone they met, 800 meters right, 800 meters left. So the heaps of corpses would reach the 2nd floor, yes. And after the war, we found 12 tons of human ashes here.
So the Wola is an area of Warsaw, we need to say that. It's rather a big area, and it's to the west of the city center. Is it the biggest part? Maybe it's the biggest.
One of the biggest districts of Warsaw.
It's a large district at any rate. And you would pass through it on the road to Poznan, for example, or Campinos, perhaps, to the forest. So this was the area the Germans first attacked, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To try and take it back.
Yeah. And as we said, they used SS units, yes.
They used the SS, right?
They respected no Geneva Convention. That's why they would kill anyone they met on their way, women, children, men.
They just killed everybody, but then they stopped at a certain point. What was the reason?
Because they did not have enough ammunition. Yes, they would report to their bosses in military forces. What shall we do? We have too many detained people and not enough ammunition.
They don't have enough bullets to kill all the people.
Yeah.
quite simply.
Yeah, but they would tackle the problem very well because they would use simply butts to kill whoever they met. Yeah.
The rifle butt. Yeah, just to on the skull. So this is an example of a fairly sinister, not fairly, an unfairly sinister business. In fact, one of the most sinister undertakings one can imagine.
And when you hold these protocols in your hands, you feel that they are heavy. Each weighs 8.8 pounds. And do you know why?
No.
That's the weight of human ashes. That's what's left of us once we are burned.
So the human ashes weigh this much, and that's the symbolic nature of this. So each of these has a symbolic weight of the ashes of the person with their name and the date of birth, etc., etc. How did they identify the people just from?
Well, this was very difficult because we did not have DNA tests at that time. Yeah. So when you analyze these protocols that were conducted by Polish Red Cross, there are some special features of people who were found. Yeah. So, for example, that they had their head broken or some parts of the garments, yes, that were found. But unthinkable tragedy. Perhaps one of the most tragic stories related to the Wola massacre is what happened to Wanda Luria. She had 3 kids. She got deported from her house. Kids got killed in front of her eyes. She was also, there was an attempt to kill her, but a bullet went through the back of her head. She was not killed. She fell on the heap of corpses.
Unconscious
onto her kids. She woke up after some time because she was not killed. She lied for 2 days on this heap of corpses, but on the 3rd day she decided to leave, to escape. Why? Because she felt movements of her baby. She was 9 months pregnant. Her baby restarted to move, so she thought, well, I need to save my baby, the only that has chance to survive World War II. And eventually she managed to escape. 2 weeks later she gave birth to her baby son, who lived till June 2018. From time to time he would come here to our museum because he wanted to keep in memory all what happened to his closed ones, and he was very full of life, an energetic man, I'd say, and it's really striking because when you look at insurgents, those who are still with us, yes, because we have hundreds of them still alive.
Right. Because a lot of them were very young, as we said before. Yeah.
They have this sparkle in their eyes, and we ask ourselves, how is it possible after so
how is
many
it possible?
tough experiences?
Yeah.
Yes.
How is it possible? What can we learn from this? Do we know why it's possible? What do they say?
Well,
what can we learn
from
them?
They know what's the price of life.
They know that every day that you're above ground is quite something, and we're really rather lazy by comparison. I think that's an amazing story, really an amazing story. And worth remembering, I think another thing worth remembering is that even in the last days of the Jewish ghetto, I'm sure it was the same in the Warsaw Uprising, they were having parties and dancing right up until the last few days. So we need to pull our socks up these days. I think we have it a little too soft, and we don't realize how good our life.
We take everything for granted, and we never know.
And we should not. It's a big, big mistake. Yeah. And if anything, standing in this room, we can remember how much we owe to good fortune today compared to these people. Yeah. Okay, Ola, thanks. Stay with us, Poland Daily Travel. We've just been talking about the Wola massacre and lessons learned. In travel you can learn a lot of lessons too. Stay with us, we're going to move on through. Poland Daily Travel at the Warsaw Uprising Museum.